Brewster here with a new episode of Chordplay. This is the Chords of Chicago, and I've had some requests to feature more of Terry Kath's music and also feature music from the band Chicago. Definitely a legendary group, and Chicago formed in Chicago, Illinois in 1967. And Terry Kath's career started around 1963, so he joined forces, later after his career had already started. Actually, Chicago, had members from different groups, and then they kind of came together and formed that big band with a horn section and everything. Definitely a legendary band. 26 studio albums in their career, 7 live albums, 11 compilations, 67 singles. 20 of those songs were top 10 hits. 3 of those songs were #1 hits. And in 1974, all of Chicago's albums that they had released up to that point, in 74, all 7 of their albums were on the charts at the same time, simultaneously. That's really cool. They've sold over 100 million albums worldwide. They're members of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and Songwriters Hall of Fame, along with other awards and accolades. Definitely, Chicago's a legendary band, and Terry Kath is a late, great, guitar legend. So in the late 60s, Chicago acquired a big name as a fan, and that's Jimi Hendrix. And Jimi was knocked out by Chicago. He loved Terry's guitar playing and vocals. He loved the horn section. He loved the whole thing. And they actually toured together, temporarily. And there's a lot of speculation about what Jimi might have done had he lived instead of, passing away. And there's a lot of connections with him and Miles Davis, which I think that was inevitable. I think Miles Davis and Hendrix definitely would have worked together. But then also I think, Jimi would have brought Chicago in. And I'm not really sure if, Jimi would have guested on a Chicago album, or if Hendrix would have brought Chicago in on one of his albums or something. He passed away in 1970, and I think Jimi was looking toward the future. And I definitely think if he would have lived, his future would have included Miles Davis, also Chicago, and a whole bunch of other people. Basically, here's an image with a quote from Hendrix after he, first met Chicago and Terry Kath. So the music and chord-based examples in this episode came from 3 Chicago albums, and they're definitely classics. Chicago Transit Authority, Chicago 2, and also Chicago 3. And like I mentioned at the beginning, they released 26 studio albums, so that's a mountain of music to dig through. And honestly, I really like the Terry Kath years, the late 60s until about the late 70s. After Terry died in 1978, the band was never really the same after that. They got poppier, and they kind of had these like ballads and lots of keyboard and piano kind of driven stuff, and that bluesy, hard-hitting, kind of blues rock and R&B, style that Terry put in the band just kind of disappeared, and then they had all these huge hits in the late 70s and throughout the 80s and beyond. And they did include like some of their early music, in their live set lists. But the Terry Kath years kind of slowly started to disappear, from their live concerts. And I don't know. Of course, I'm from Chicago. I'm a huge blues and blues rock fan. I love Terry Kath, definitely. And that's my focus and interest in the band. No offense to everything after 1978, but those Terry Kath years are awesome, and that's what we're going to hit in this episode. With the opening, that's South California Purples from Chicago Transit Authority, their first album, and it's this raunchy, rowdy kind of blues rock number like this. So it's single notes in the beginning, crawling up the low E string like that, the low E, G, G sharp to that A. And that first riff, it's basically a blues in A minor, kind of disguised, because that first chord is basically hitting like an A minor implied. So that E, G, G sharp, A, and then just grab the C and E, and that's going to function as part of A minor, but you're just doing that. Like that. Da-na-na, right? that's all A minor, right? Then it moves to the 4 chord, which is D minor, and you're going to do the same thing. Just move it over a set of strings. Now start on the A string. Same riff, just different set of strings, and now it's D minor instead of A minor, right? Same riff. So then you're going to loop that 4 chord a couple times, go back to A minor. And then right there, eventually the verse starts. They kind of loop that a few times, and then you're going to hear this. So that's the open A, C slid to an E, and then you're going to basically go to the flat 6, that F7 right there. So a little part of F7, and then move that down a half step to the 5 chord, E7, and then he just flips it to power chords. Now it's D5, C5, B5, C5, D5, and go right back to that A minor riff. Really interesting tune, and I love that swampy, kind of raunchy, blues rock riff. Really cool. Next up is the song I'm a Man. This is also from Chicago Transit Authority, and since this is a Chordplay episode, I'm going to reveal the fact that Terry Kath was really into minor 7th chords. He used them all the time, and the next 5 examples, including this one, are going to feature some different ways of using these minor 7th chords. And I'm going to show you like the proper way to play these chords. Now you could take, like if we move to C minor here, take a C minor bar chord, lift up your pinky and add that B flat, and that's technically, C minor 7 right there. Right? We could also play it like that and add that B flat way up on top on the B string. Right? But Terry didn't play minor 7th chords like that. He basically did either the jazz, kind of jazz and funk version like this, where you're barring, with your 3rd finger on the D, G, and B string, and then your middle finger wraps over and grabs the root on the low E. C minor 7 like that. And then another way he liked to do it was with a thumb wrap, and he would fret the, the root note with his thumb, and then bar with his index finger on the same strings, that D, G, and B. And there's C minor 7. So you can definitely do it, these, other variations or versions. But the Terry Kath, minor 7th chords is either this or that. And from I'm a Man, basically it starts grooving, and then Terry comes in and he's using that C minor 7th chord and also using volume swells. And you hear that first one kind of, swelled open with the volume control, and then he slides it down, does it again and adds some vibrato to that chord, and then he slides it up. And then you start hearing the original way I was playing that was what Terry played, and then that other part I added, this. That's basically the bass part, like what Peter Cetera was playing, right? And then that's a composite arrangement, because Terry definitely wasn't doing all the bass notes. That's what the bass player was doing. But it definitely is missing that, because he's really just hitting some chord hits. It kind of gets scratchy and starts doing some kind of funky scratching in there too. But then when you hear that bass part added, it definitely comes to life right there. And then right there you hear this climb up, then it's an E flat, E flat power chord, and then D, D flat, and go right back into that C minor 7 riff. Just keep in mind, that's what Terry was technically playing like that. I love adding, bass parts and making composite arrangements whenever possible, and that's pretty funky and cool. Next up is Better End Soon from Chicago 2, and once again, C minor 7, played kind of the jazzy funk way, and check this out. Really short, really simple too here, but basically, like I said, that kind of funky jazz version of the minor 7th chord. You could do it this way too, but I think he's probably doing it that way because there's a lot of scratching going on. So just start, 5 strums on that, and then this kind of funky rhythm, and then do it again. Then these are 30-second notes, like scratched. Really tough right there. And then you start hearing them just vamp out. Really simple example, but a great way to practice, those minor 7th shapes, and also your scratchy kind of funk rhythm playing too. Next up is the song Free. This came from the album Chicago 3, and I did notice some transcriptions online that were not quite right, and this is basically what Terry was doing. So it starts with this really obnoxious, kind of creepy, like fourths or double stop kind of riff. And I saw some transcriptions where they just played that using like regular power chords, but that's not quite what he's doing. He's playing like the top part of a power chord, because basically he's moving in like that, and that's like a C over G right there. Like think of stacked power chords, right? But he's just playing the bottom part. And he does the same thing on the next set of strings. It's basically an F over C that he's sliding into, but like that. And then he does the same thing up here. So right there, it's like moving in, A flat over B flat, and then moving this in, this A flat over E flat. Right? And then right there, that's basically an octave higher than where we started, because there's your, C over G again. Right? So that riff, just like a series of double stops kind of sliding around. Really interesting riff there with those double stops kind of smeared and smashed around. And then after that runs its course, guess what we're doing next? Right back to C minor 7 again. And it's this hyperactive, so there he's doing the thumb wrap C minor 7 like that, and then he's reaching up and grabbing that extension. It's kind of like a F over C, I guess. And he's doing that. Like that. Really cool riff. Next up's Poem 58. This came from Chicago Transit Authority, and we're still using a minor 7th chord, but now it's in a different key, and he sprinkles a couple extra chords in the mix, like this. Something like that. So now we're in A minor. So there's an A minor 7 with the thumb wrap like that. So strum, couple muted strums, strum, a couple muted strums like that. And then right there, it's like a little part of A7. And then right there, you know, against A, that's like an A6 sus4 implied right there. So you're doing this. And you distinctly hear this change. Like all that was on the downbeat. Then you hear this, and it's basically an E flat to an F, like the top part, and then it's on the offbeat. And it's 5 times for that little kind of chord hit. And then you basically go right back into that A minor 7 riff. So it's really kind of deceptive the way he's using those chords. And that's all against A, and then it abruptly goes to that weird change. Next up is the song Make Me Smile. This came from Chicago 2, and once again I noticed some transcriptions online that were way off, but I'm going to correct some of those problem areas. And Make Me Smile, something like this. Section, like the intro is totally different, but when the guitar starts kind of, you know, strumming in right there during the verse, and that's what I came up with, and I'm pretty sure that's what, you know, Terry played. The transcriptions I saw online were all like full bar chords, you know, like that. That's not what Terry was playing. He rarely ever played like full bar chords like that. Keep in mind, he's a funk, blues, soul, you know, guitarist, also a singer. So he simplified his parts a lot, and he would arrange, you know, his chords in the same neighborhood. Instead of moving around the fretboard with bar chords, he would find those kind of funky and jazzy extensions and, you know, rearrange it in basically one position or one area, like this. So that first chord, he's basically doing the thumb wrap on a C minor 7, right, like that. And it's really just a low E, D, and G. There's no A, there's no B or high E. It's just three strings of that chord. And right there, you're going to basically move to that. And I'm pretty sure that's the way Terry would have played it. I would have actually played it that way. I'm not afraid to use my pinky, but knowing Terry's, you know, playing style and habits, he probably did just line up his fingers like that. And that's A flat major right there, either that way or this way. That would be proper technique. But keep in mind, he's got the thumb wrap, so, you know, sitting those 2 fingers down like that's pretty easy. Like that. And then right there, it's E flat over G. You know, think of that like inverted chord. E flat over G. So C minor 7, A flat major, E flat over G, and then he continues that pattern. You know, there's a D minor 7 waiting right there, and then right there, there's a G7 right next door. So the chord progression I noticed on Ultimate Guitar, you know, in some online tabs was right, but he's not playing those full bar chords. He's using little funky and R&B based partials like that. Last but not least is Movin In from Chicago 2, and I actually saw requests online, like on Ultimate Guitar and other tab sites, asking for this song. I didn't see any, you know, transcriptions of it, but I'm pretty sure this is exactly what Terry played. But keep in mind, as this unfolds, he just variated this. It has this kind of bluesy, loose, almost Hendrix-y and R&B, you know, kind of flavor and sound. And he was just adding all these different variations and little mutations to this riff. But something like this. kind of playing around with it, which is what Terry was doing. And if you listen to it really carefully, you can hear he's just basically looping that same progression, but he's sprinkling all these different fills and variations of those chords in the mix, which is really cool. Hendrix did this a lot too. So it starts with C major with a thumb wrap right like that. Right? And he's kind of playing with that A note on top, so like a C major to a C6. Right? Then it goes to E minor 7, and then you're going to add that A note again, and then that's like an E7 sus4. Right? Like that. Then it's A minor 7 to like an A sus4. And then it's F to like an F sus4. Like that. So that's the basic progression. C major with kind of an added, sixth in there. E minor 7 with that added fourth. A minor 7 with an added fourth. And then F major with an added, sus4. But then he starts variating that, and I was just kind of picking out, some different things I heard him do, like you can hear him like sliding. I think eventually he does move down to that F down here. And I'm hearing like that little F, instead of doing it there, sometimes I think he's grabbing that, like that, and kind of sliding it like Jimmy. So really interesting song, but that's basically what he's kind of doing. He's playing with that, to that, that, to that. And you hear all those kind of doubled, and all that kind of stuff. Really, really cool song. That's going to wrap this episode of Chordplay with this look at the Chords of Chicago and also Terry Kath's music. And definitely a legendary group. He's a legendary late great guitarist and definitely very influential. And there's something magical about those late 60s and, the bulk of the 70s as far as Chicago's music. There's a lot of great music hiding on those albums. And not only the hits. Yeah, the hits are great. 25 or 6 to 4 and Color My World and some of those songs. But then those B-sides and deep cuts, South California Purples and some of those songs, it's like, yeah, why don't they play this on the radio? Some great music. So anyway, leave some feedback and comments. Please subscribe to Night Lessons, and I'll be back before you know with more content and material. Thank you.